Welcome to What Am Comedy, everyone. My name is Matt Farrell. It's a show where we interview some local Connecticut comedians and get together to talk about comedy and what it's like to be a comedian. We thought we'd do a bit of a special episode for you guys tonight. Recently, the Me Too movement has exposed some really shameful and horrible truths surrounding the sexual misconduct in the entertainment industry, and specifically, it relates back to comedy. We wanted to take a little time to talk about it tonight. Here to discuss some of the things that have been going on. We've got a couple of female local comics and a good friend here as well. We're just going to get a little bit more into the discussion side of things tonight and see if we can't learn a little something. We're going to take you around the table now and introduce you to our comedians. Here we have Bree, Pete, and Kendra. And I'm Matt. I'm normally the host, but I'm kind of just listening tonight. So, all right. We wanted to share a little bit of personal stories if you guys felt comfortable. Obviously, Pete, this does center a little bit more around, issues surrounding women. So I think we're going to kind of let Bree and Kendra take the lead on this, and we'll see what they have to say. So if any of you guys wanted to just jump in and start us off, though.
So for me, the reason why I started comedy and all that is because I'm the type of person that turns every horrible thing into a joke. That's just a natural defense and coping mechanism. And when I was younger, unfortunately, when I was younger, at the age of 7, I was molested by my uncle. And then who collects child pornography and all that stuff. He's a horrible human being, and I wish the worst upon him. And when I was in college, I got raped my freshman year, and I had to drop out of college because it was such a traumatic experience. I woke up in the hospital with absolutely no memory, and all I remember is waking up and feeling like something was pulling on my neck, because apparently he wrapped man-made that fiber rope around my neck and was holding me as he was forcing himself on me. And I woke up with bruises all over my face and everything, and it was awful. And I had such severe PTSD and depression from it, I couldn't finish school. And it still affects me in my everyday life and personal relationships and all of that. And making jokes about it for me is just one way that I deal with it, because it's as if I'm looking it in the face and laughing at it, because I'm not letting it consume me. It does not define me, and it shouldn't define anybody. You aren't the one that did that to you. It was somebody else, and that's on them. And I feel a lot of girls nowadays will, a lot of struggles and questions is like, well, is she playing the victim? She's victimizing herself, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's partly true. I do agree with some aspects of that, because, some women do get consumed by it and do think it's their fault and do think that they deserve that. But I feel that that's just the result of society telling you to shh. You can't talk about this. This is your fault. We can't talk about it. So for me, telling the jokes that I do that are sexually themed and a little bit, raunchy, I'm told I'm a dirty comic because of it. But you know what? Open your eyes. You have no problem with people going to war and shooting people in the face and watching zombies eat each other. Why can't we talk about sex? Mm-hmm. What's the problem with it?
That's funny, because how in our culture that violence has become so okay, but anything sexual, I think that's what causes so many problems. People are so uptight about anything sexual. The minute it's brought up, they just kind of clench away at it. I know a specific example of how there was a video game conference, and the banner for this game had people naked bodies on the walls, and they were like, you have to get rid of that, you can't do that. So they dismembered them, and they were just torsos, bloody. That was okay. Mm-hmm. The human body was not okay, but the blood and gore. And I'm a horror fan. I love blood and gore, but I know which is, one thing is people get so uptight, especially as a queer comic. People think that's everything, but mm-hmm. I also my worry is how are people going to react to that? If they're going to be okay. I get the same thing. A dirty comic. I just talk about my life, and I've tried, especially lately, to not shy away from it and worry about that perception. But I think you're right. A lot of it, when people tell women, especially to, throw it under the rug, hush it away, don't talk about it. It's because they don't want to they don't want to admit this stuff happens and that it's a problem.
Yeah. And I think it's like very unfortunate that like experiences like yours are actually like pretty common. And the way that kind of like all these larger societal issues of like misogyny, et cetera, the way it can play into comedy is like someone who even just talks, like a woman who talks about sex or a queer comic who talks about sex, and like me being both of these groups, like, you know, people have sex, you want to make jokes about it, not a big deal. But sometimes like some audience members will see you talking about sex as like a sign that you're easy, or like as an invitation, or like
an invitation.
Yeah, like, oh, like since she talked about sex on stage, like she probably would like want to sleep with me or something, which is very unfortunate. And I feel like a lot of, I mean, I don't know, I feel like a lot of guy comics, like you don't get like girls coming up to you afterward and being like, hey, so like,
No, 'cause we
you
would
talk
like it.
about, okay,
That's
but like,
like every dude. It's just like,
but it's like also, it's also weird when it's at your job, and I think comedy is an unusual profession in some ways that, you know, your workplace, it's usually bars where people are drinking and stuff, but you are there to do a job, and most people would feel kind of awkward about being hit on at your job, depending on like, especially like a Starbucks barista, like their job is basically to be nice to you, and they can't publicly be like, please leave me alone without facing some sort of repercussions. And I think some of what I've been worried about, like as I continue going into comedy, is like potentially stuff like that. And I guess that's like one of the reasons why I make so many jokes about being a lesbian. It's kind of a force field to be like, okay, so like, just so you know, I'm not interested in sleeping with you. And so far it's worked, but I also am pretty new, and I haven't been too many places.
you know, there's guys that does not stop me.
Yeah,
I've got-
they don't
you
even
know
hear
what's
that.
funny?
That's encouragement.
Well, yeah, I've done a show, and then afterwards someone like asked me to have a threesome with his wife, and I wasn't sure if he was kidding, but I was just like, no, I'm good. And he was like, yeah, well, if you want to come over. And I'm like, I said no, I'm fine.
You know, it's funny. When I first started doing comedy, my first set of jokes that I was writing was that I wasn't a sexual deviant. Like, because I'm, in all honesty, I'm not. I cry when the comes out. And I was trying really hard, and an older comedian who's been in the game longer than me came up to me and looked at me and said, I have to be honest with you. Look at you. And I said, yeah. And he goes, no one's going to believe that you're not having sex.
Oh, damn.
And I was like,
Yeah.
excuse me? Because of the way that I look, like I just look like I'm, you know, on my back, legs in the air every damn day. Like, are you serious? Like, I was so offended. I had no idea how to respond to that. So then I flipped my jokes around to make it seem like I'm just really gross. That's, you know, you guys know my joke. Like, I'm just gross. Like, I try to just make it out that I'm gross instead. And it's just, but that's another thing, like being someone who's attractive, it's really a pain in the ass because everybody thinks, oh, well, she's either gonna be a bitch or she's super insecure. You know what I mean? And there's no in between. Like, why can't I be a normal person?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and there's also, I think there's also ways that, I don't even mean necessarily people within comedy, like bookers, but more of like audiences will judge women based on their appearances instead of like their actual comedy, and they'll be like, oh, no one wants to watch her because she's not.
How often do you hear, oh, woman comic? Okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, she's gonna talk about her vagina. Like,
It's like, I talk about more than that, but
Okay.
Yeah.
She should be like,
And
yeah, I will. You're gonna sit there and listen to it.
Well, it's also frustrating for me because, and I mean, we're all comics here, have been in comedy. Like, how many times has a guy gone on stage at an open mic and talked about his dick for like 5 minutes? I mean,
Sorry.
both
Yeah.
of you do that.
yeah, and like you could talk
Then
about
I talk about another guy's dick.
you could talk about dicks, but it's like but like no, there's no one that's like, oh, I'm tired of hearing guys talk about their penis. But like a woman talking about her own genitalia is somehow seen
Taboo.
as well, not even taboo, but seen as very like boring or like very trite or whatever, when there have literally been like years of comedy about. I mean, I know both of you don't just talk about your dicks, but there are years of comedy about.
I don't have enough dick to talk about it that much.
But there are people who will like just talk about it, or just talk about all the like woman they slept with or something, and then a woman does the same thing with like the partners that she sleeps with, and it's seen as like too much, or it's seen as like not becoming on her. But the same scrutiny is not afforded to people of a different gender who do the same thing.
It's equality.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we should judge male comics at all, you know?
I think too, it
Yeah.
comes down to because there's so like obviously comedy is just it's male dominated. There's
Yeah.
so many more guys. So like
Yeah.
you kind of I feel like it gets okay. This open mic had 20 guys and 2 women. The guys, especially hearing each other, just okay, yeah, they're doing the same thing I'm doing, whatever. Then they latch on to whatever the woman's talking about and want to critique it or whatever, and just have
Yeah.
an issue with it in some way. But I feel like it is. Obviously, I have a different like. I feel like comics are getting better. Maybe the younger ones are starting to not do that as much. I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of the older ones, that's where you kind of get that issue with like.
I think it also has to do with a lot of finding your voice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Because
a huge
talking
part,
about genitalia and stuff like that, it's easy. You know, everybody can make fun of it because it's one of the most relatable things. And until you start really diving into other subjects of relatability, you really don't know what other people can relate to, you know?
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
yeah, so it is an easy subject to talk about, but it is a touchy subject to talk about. It's easier for men to talk about than it is for women to talk about, you know?
Yeah.
And that just goes with the whole, if you think about the beginning of comedy, when comedy started in vaudeville times, the women that were involved in that entertainment were the assistant to the male comedian. They were just the
Yeah.
sideshow. Think about Joan Rivers. When Joan Rivers first started doing comedy, she was just the second part of the act until she said, hey, screw you, I'm going off on my own. And she struggled for a while fighting the man. But her and Lucille Ball, they stuck it to the man and they kept at it and they kept going, and they are definitely pioneer feminism like of the comedy world and entertainment world, you know? So it is possible to overcome it. You just have to have the consistency and the diligence and just the heart to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That being said, I think there are like hashtag not all comedy scenes, but I think hearing people who are interested in comedy, but they're like, oh, I'm afraid of going to an open mic and just hearing kind of like jokes about someone like me, or like jokes about someone with my experience, and kind of like being looked down upon about who I am. I think that restricts some women going into stand-up comedy specifically, because like I know tons of funny women, like, and they're all doing like different things, and most of them I have met through comedy and stand-up comedy and improv and stuff. But also there's a lot of people who just make like funny Vine videos, and these people tend to be from more like marginalized groups, and I think their fear is like so like if there's a Muslim woman wearing a hijab who's hilarious, I feel like her fear may be like, I go to a comedy show and then someone like calls me a terrorist, or like something like weird, and it's I mean, it's also part of the idea of comedy is like you should be able to go on stage and like say what you want, and I think a lot of people's immediate pushback to be like saying, oh, you should think about what you're saying, and like how, if you want to like bring more people in, is like, oh, it's First Amendment, like this is America, like as if I'm trying to like take away someone's rights. But I think that like it might be small things like that that may lead to the demographics of comedy now. And yeah, there have been a few moments with me where I go home after a mic and I'm like, geez, like that was very exhausting, because I just heard a lot of people make like jokes about women that like were kind of upsetting, or like, you know, like just different things.
And with that being said, that really bothered me too when I was
Yeah.
going to mics and like listening to some of the male comics just like talking about all these women that they want to have sex with and how
Yeah.
much they love the pussy and blah, blah, blah and all this nonsense. So I would get up and say, oh, thank you for leaving the stage and reminding me why I love my so much.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
and like, and it's good that like comedy also affords like some women to like be able to make fun of that.
Yeah.
Which is great, and like people should make fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Like, particularly, like if you look at like open mic scenarios, there's just so many of those guys who just go up there and throwing that, and I sure it's got to be just like eroding of the walls by the waves, but just the same thing. But a lot of times, that's not. I feel like that's not going to change. There's always going to be those guys
Yeah.
who are just doing that same thing over. And
Yeah.
I think that and I've seen in the last couple of years, I've seen those guys go away, then immediately replaced by 4 new ones. But they do go away, and the ones who are actually crafting real material and working on things and being good at
Yeah.
it
Stick around. Yeah, that's true.
It's
That's
the
true.
whole finding your voice,
Yeah.
finding the journey. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard. Like you got to discover the things that.
My question for you guys: do you worry about that stuff more from how like other comics or more audience members? Like when you were saying audience member was like threesome. Like
Yeah.
I always wonder whether or not the bigger concern is audience member or how other other comics, quote unquote comics, are.
I'm more worried about the comics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because for me, like audience members, 9 times out of 10, they're terrified of me. Mission accomplished. Comedians see me backstage and see my personality outside of what I'm like on stage and everything. And, you know, like, I was asked to do a show in New York City by some booker who has a reputation, and I got called by 3 other bookers who I worked with who told me, you be careful with him. And like, watch yourself, don't be alone. Like, don't let him get you alone.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, that's a little scary.
Yeah.
And audience members, 9 times out of 10, the people who are going to comedy shows, if you really think about it, they're with their boyfriend or girlfriend. Like, I can't tell you how many times I got up on stage and I've literally watched a girlfriend go, you don't laugh at her, she's attractive. Like, you know what I mean? Like he chuckled and she just like dug her nails into him and was like, you are not allowed to
Yeah.
laugh. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Like, it's my job to make everyone laugh.
Your goal is to make a gay couple.
You know?
Like, he is so cute. Don't laugh at him.
I'm your bear.
I think he yelled at me the other day on stage.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's more, for me, it's more the comedians, because that's more of the intimate relationship backstage
Yeah.
that you
Yeah,
don't really know
definitely.
about.
Behind closed
The audience
doors.
members are going to be like little sheep. They're, no offense, audience members, but like they're not gonna prowl at you unless they're like they've been stalking you. I think like that couple that asked you to have a 3-way with them. Like, I'm a little jealous. I've never got asked after a show.
He
Like,
wasn't that cute. No, what you're saying is entirely right. So like I wouldn't even say it's necessarily other comics I'm worried about, because I feel like with comics, like the CT scene has been incredibly welcoming to
Yeah.
me, being like a random like black lesbian just joining the
I
scene
think
with my weird
wait,
jokes.
you're black.
But
like with bookers,
Yeah.
if I could get like kind of, I don't know, like workers' rights about this in some way, like I think in any job where there's a boss and there's like also room for exploitation, you're going to kind of be afraid. And like with comedy, especially because it's dependent on so many things, like, oh, does this person like does this person like me? Does this booker think I'm not even like attractive, but just like a pleasant person? Then I could like get on a show. And you're balancing so much in terms of like, I want to make sure, I want to be able to get on more shows, so I want to be nice to this person. But then like there are some bookers, I mean, hashtag not all bookers, but I've also like heard of people, and I haven't even been in the game that long, who have abused their power as someone who's able to put certain people on shows and use that to either harass or like make other women uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think so. There's a lot of discussion about like, oh, like why is this Me Too stuff coming up now? Like, why didn't people talk about it before? But it's because like they're the ones with the money. They're kind of in charge of your money, and also you don't want. If you see that one booker has like a lot of buddies in the scene, you don't want to alienate even more people by saying this is what this person did to me.
It's true.
Yeah.
I did a show that was an audition to get other gigs through a production company, and the guy was like, yeah, you were really great, we loved your set, we're definitely going to contact you for more shows. The only thing they contacted me for was to do a bathing suit commercial.
Oh.
you got that call too?
Yeah. Like, I was like, yeah, did you even listen to my, like, you know, and
Yeah.
I had it, like, I can confidently say I had a good set. I had the audience laughing. It was
Yeah.
a good set. It was good. And that was all that you pulled away from it was, oh, we're going to sign you up to go do a bathing suit thing. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
Really?
and like stuff like that is gross, and it makes woman not like would they ask a dude to be in a bathing
No.
suit commercial? Like even if it was the most attractive, even if it was like Pete Angelo here.
Look at this beast.
Like, have you ever been asked to be on a swimsuit commercial after you performed comedy?
I imagine you wouldn't recruit your models at a comedy show at the very
Yeah.
least.
Right?
You know,
Like,
like
and
you
it's-
might want a male swimsuit model. You may not just take whatever person looking for some sort of. Oh, okay, here, yeah, I can use this to my advantage. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what seems shady about it to me.
Yeah, it's like, and yeah, it's like you were there for doing comedy. You were a comedian, and then they recruit you for this thing that is like based entirely on your looks. And like, I mean, there are models like already. Like, there's an entire profession towards like looking very nice and like being able to pose well. But when you're doing, it's kind of like a woman like giving a presentation about like DNA at some fancy science thing, and then afterwards someone being like, hey, do you want to be like in this magazine because I really like your shoes? It's like that's not the
Yeah.
point
It
of
actually
what was
reminded me
going
of a
on.
Mitch Hedberg joke.
Oh really?
It's like, all right, you're funny. Can you farm?
Can you farm?
Yeah, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think women get that more just because people
And don't-
see women as being.
Yeah, and don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, like, believe me, I love the compliments. I love
Yeah.
the fact that people are like, oh, you know, I wanted you to do this, I see you doing this. Like, any woman who denies the fact of being told that she's attractive or, like, recognized of being attractive, like, and says, oh, I don't like that, blah, 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 you're full of it. Like, you're absolutely
I think
full
that's
of
just
it.
a person
It
thing.
is-
Yeah, I think
it's-
people like to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody loves pats on the back, no matter what it is. It's just the way we were raised with gold stars and A's and all that nonsense. Like, it's just a recognition. And for me, like, I always say, with every choice you make, there will always be consequences, whether they are negative, whether they are positive. Like, you guys, we all are friends on Facebook. I do modeling. I put up pictures where I'm in like lacy lingerie, blah, blah, blah. But I'm making funny faces. Like, I'm not trying to be sexy. Like, I'm just being a goofball.
Yeah.
Because that's just who I am as a person. I'm super awkward, like, when it comes to that stuff because of my personal issues and past. But at the same time, that doesn't give you the right to just see me as a body.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I am, you know, I'm Kendra is brilliant. You are very smart. Your jokes are very smart. You're eloquent in the way that you approach everything. You have such a different point of view, and the box that you see things in is very incredible in the way that you write your jokes. It is very present in how you do your jokes and everything. And Pete, like you too, you're also intelligent in your own way. And we all, and Matt, he's smart too. Don't be fooled
too,
by
Matt.
the
Don't
Grateful
fool me
Dead
in that.
everybody, and the hippy dippiness. But like, we all have our different intelligence that we all bring to the table.
Yeah.
And to not be recognized for that intelligent aspect of us is just, it's disgusting, and it's like you're just scratching the iceberg of who we are as people, you know, and it's terrible. Like, I love when you talk about how you're like a black girl that has like the perfect customer service voice because you grew up in the suburbs, but you're so much more than that. Like, it's not, and you know, and that's what's so funny about it, is because you're not just a black girl with a customer service voice. Like, you're an educated, strong woman. Like, that's what you are. And like, the fact that you play off of that as a backlash to it is what makes your comedy so good, you know.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. That was such a moment.
Let's not stick together.
Sorry.
It's like, man, you're
No, I agree. What's interesting, there's a fine line to it. It touches back to something that you were saying towards the beginning, and I absolutely do the same thing. I talking about cracking jokes about things that are a little uncomfortable for you. I was cracking jokes at my dad's funeral, you know, and I had my whole family looking at me like, "You're not supposed to do that."
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing, you know. Did you want to hear how I made him late to his own funeral? Because I was driving the cremated ashes. You know what I mean? He's late for everything else in his whole life. Might as well have made him late for that too. You know, but it's just, you know, it's funny because it's taboo to some people, it isn't to others. And I think that and it's something that other comedians have touched on, like specifically George Carlin comes to mind, how he talks about the big difference is what you attach to it, you know? And I didn't mean anything by telling those jokes at the funeral, I didn't mean anything other than making light of the fact that I was late. I'm almost more hating on myself than anything, and this and that, and this is just how I'm dealing with it. You know what I mean? You know, and then at the same time, you know, other people look at it and they'll, no, you don't behave that way, you don't do this, you don't do that. You know what? I'm trying to make the situation better, not worse. I don't necessarily hold that against myself, and I think that's when I'm writing a joke that's questionable. That's something that really comes to mind is. It's not so much how are people are going to take it, but where am I coming from with it? If you know, and if a couple of people, you know, don't take it the way I intended it, that's like every other joke you're ever going to write. Not everyone is going to understand your mindset on it 110%. But I do think if you're coming from a good place, you know, and I think if you are trying to make fun, to make people happy, to spread a little joy and laughter, I think it can be a good thing. But it can be very, very tough because we all see that really differently. You know?
Yeah. I think, I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. And I think, like, this comes up a lot with, like, rape jokes, which has been a big thing with, like, Daniel Tosh and all these things. And I think, like, part of it's, like, good writing. Like, are you writing this well enough to where it is relatable for the audience? But it's also, I think, with certain things like rape, particularly in murder. One thing that I noticed is that there's a huge difference with like jokes about rape, where it's like, oh, like rape is awful, but you make a joke about it, and then jokes that make the person saying it seem like a rapist, like straight up seem. And but there've been, there are people who do jokes, and I think it also. Now that I've been doing it for a while, it's also interesting because there are like some people where I'm like, oh, like I know that they're not a rapist and I know their actual views, but if you were an audience member and you just heard that person say that one thing, you'd be like kind of like, oh, like, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it can be a subtle difference. But it's
There's
also
so many tripwires when it comes to comedy about how you're being what your intention is to being how you're being perceived and all that stuff.
Yeah, but there are. I think this is
And
especially.
People do it badly a lot.
Yes, people do it badly a lot. That's definitely true, and I think like especially now, like I heard in the vaudeville days. When you did comedy, it wasn't expected that you were like that person, like the person you were performing on stage. But now, like, but now, like, post Louis C.K. and like post all of that stuff, it's weird looking back on some of their comedy. And I have noticed like comedians who are closer to me and like in the scene, like looking at some of their comedy, I'm like, oh, like it doesn't seem like you like women that much. Like maybe you do, but if you want to make that clear, you might want to change this, you know. And like Louis C.K. had a lot of jokes about like he had jokes where it seemed like it was like making fun of how gross he is, but now it kind of seems weirdly like venting about.
But he also is, if someone like a lot of times comics will come up that and it's like. All right, I am not a great person, and I'm using this as like to make other people laugh, and they kind of that's weird, regardless of whether or not they know how true something is or not.
Yeah, we're all not great people.
I'm not saying I'm not. comedians automatically
aren't even people.
Yeah, comedians automatically aren't good people.
Beings.
But you know, you wanna. There's a difference between being like, oh wow, I'm trying to work on myself, and then, I mean, I think someone like mentioned this recently. They like. I was talking to a friend and they said, oh, like, there was a joke that someone wrote that was really good, and then after, like, and I thought it addressed, like, sexual assault, like, really well and blah, blah, blah. And then afterward, I found out that they were a sex offender, and it ruined their joke for me, because I realized kind of the angle that they were looking at it from, as opposed to...
I feel like I know who you're talking about.
No names.
I know, but I feel like I know who you're talking about. I actually, you know, we're sitting here talking about women and Me Too and all that stuff. Gentlemen, it is never discussed about women who prowl on men. For example, I actually have a comedy friend who this girl was like, I'll sell tickets for you, I'm going to bring lots of people to your show, blah, blah, blah. I got you the hookup, but only if you have sex with me. I'm not kidding you. So,
I gotta know who that was.
discuss, boys.
Oh, I don't know that.
I can take a pretty good guess.
Wow. I know I'm
I
not
know
a
the
guy.
appeal of Jason Voorhees to most people, so
But
the fact people talk to me, it can definitely happen, and people can, because there are plenty of guys who are like not what guy-like, I don't know, that are very much like, I always want to do the comedy and that's it. And like,
Yeah.
it can easily be taken advantage of by women. You know, and obviously people always say that it doesn't happen quite as much. True, but it still does.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that, like, and even for me, you know, being in like the LGBT community where that kind of stuff actually does happen to guys a lot, it's never something that's kind of come across me. It definitely helps the way I look and my size. But I think it comes down to the same thing. It's got to be, I feel like it has to be policed from within a bit, especially if it's comics doing things at comics like that. And I think even for what happens to women, it's comics have to notice that and see that and be like, all right, we have to put a stop to that. And no one else is going to. And that's how I think things get better. Because especially considering, because when it comes to, say, the proportion of men to women in comedy, there are just so many more guys. And 95% of the guys could be good. That 5% who are being pains in the asses, just they have the rest of us have to sit there and be like, all right, knock it off. Like, this is I think it has to come down to policing, and I feel like that's been a decently done in Connecticut comedy, which might help because it's smaller than say Boston, New York. You just can't keep track of everyone.
Yes, that's also true. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's gross no matter what the gender of the person
because I know
doing
that
it.
everyone always talks about it happening to women and everything,
Yeah.
but it does happen to guys too. You know,
Yeah.
you can't we'll sit here and talk about equality, but we're only talking about one gender. What about the other
Yeah.
one? You know, and it's like they're.
I think equality, it comes in the same way. It has to be treated the same way of like, oh, you can't just be like, oh, come on, dude. Just like, no, that sucks and that's awful. And someone should kind of be like,
oh, you had a girl hit on you, she's gonna throw it. But no, although it was referred to as sausage, I am not a piece of meat. Like, oh man.
Yeah, I didn't know someone did that, but we could talk about that after the show. I don't want to. Anyway,
but
it's exploitation in any form. Like,
anytime
It is
people,
no matter what,
and it's going to happen so much of like, especially people of power, bookers, that kind of stuff, or comedians have been doing it a while at the comics, and. I had to say this of the Connecticut scene of like especially comics who've been doing it, like myself, 3 or less years for like that group has been really good about kind of standing by each other and being supportive about it.
It definitely feels like we're in some kind of fight club. Like, like it really does.
And so that's my big thing is like it's gotta be like especially like police, like people have to. You can't just like, brush it off, let it go, and then when the woman comes out about it, that's when everyone goes, well, is she being honest? 9 people saw it, but no one's talking about it. Like, if you said it when it came up, no one would be questioning whether or not it's valid. But people want to be like, and kind of because they don't want to get involved and back away.
I
was thinking about renting myself as like gay bodyguard.
I mean, honestly, you would get so much money from that service.
I wouldn't
even know.
Actually, I wouldn't charge. I wouldn't charge people. I just be like,
I'll pay you in weed.
That's definitely true. And I mostly know younger comics, but I do feel like we are doing a good job of letting people know about stuff going on.
Even right now, we're talking about it.
We're talking about which, but yeah, I also understand why some people would be like really afraid of talking about certain things, and I think to one of the discussion points, like talking about, because there are things that people do that are obviously horrible, like Bill Cosby and stuff, and then there's like the smaller interactions where it's like this person isn't a bad person, but they keep doing this thing that's annoying, and it would be so much easier in my life where if they don't do that. And I think it could be hard sometimes to bring stuff like that up because you're like, I don't want to alienate this person. Like they're someone I like respect, but I feel like if I do bring it up, they may like take it negatively and like there might be some sort of retaliation.
But honestly, you never know because it could go the opposite. Like, you know what? I was being stupid. And
that's also true.
Maybe help correct them before they do something way dumber.
That is also true.
Or like stay down this path and just like it gets worse and worse. Like
and it does depend a lot on like the connection with someone.
You know, people doing material. If someone's like, open mics, people throw out new stuff, whatever.
Yes.
This I was like, oh, that was offensively bad, and you tell them, but like they're like, okay, that wasn't my intention, but I threw it out there, and I might try it. if it's the same thing over and over and over and they're not listening to anyone, yeah, then maybe there's a whole other story to that.
Yeah, yeah.
But, we should talk to each other about, so like, hey, that was a little iffy what you said. Why not try to change this a little bit?
Yeah, like I know
Take it
you're not
a different
coming
point
from
of view.
there.
Yeah,
but
you're not coming from
Yeah,
It's all about communication.
yeah.
It all boils down to communication. Don't be so afraid. We stand on stage and talk to hundreds of people who we do not know. Why can't we talk to each other at a
That's
bar
very true.
in Naugatuck and talk like honestly?
Because we're like, there's no microphone in my hand. I can't talk.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
Like this is
When am I gonna get my light?
yeah, no, that is
Just having
true.
a conversation with a comic, and they're talking, just like take your phone out, and you're like,
Like I want you to stop. I want you to stop.
Wait, so do you guys remember this Dave Chappelle sketch where he does the wrap it up thing where he
oh
pulls
yeah,
out and he's
Like a
Academy Award
timer.
speeches.
wrap it up, B.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely room for lots of discussion. I think one of the discussion points was like how to talk to what are things that men could do to prevent to like make things more comfortable for women.
I've said I'll be more creepier to men.
Oh my god.
I do a bit about it. I'm like, imagine if I went to a dude and been like, you should smile more.
Yeah, I mean,
You got a pretty mouth.
like they don't understand how weird that is. I think with comedy too, it's a strange line to straddle because it's like we're coworkers, but we're coworkers who listen to each other's secrets like every
Yeah.
week. Mm-hmm. So there's like a closeness that like can come out. I mean, and I think a few people have like spoken to me about, oh, this one person like tried to ask me out, and I was like, no, and I think like there might be some tensions around asking people out, but I feel like general
There's definitely
good
got to be a
rules.
weird
Yeah.
line
Time
to
out.
go down.
Don't where you eat. Do not date a
Yeah,
comic.
yeah.
Like if that's your job, treat it as your job. Like don't date where you eat. Like honestly, like I've dated 2 comedians. Worst mistake of my life. like it was, and it wasn't even like we're like officially boyfriend and girlfriend, but we did see each other. But it
Yeah.
was just like it got complicated.
Okay,
And
yeah.
don't like and it's just one of those things that it's like just don't date where you eat.
Okay.
You know?
I've never dated a comedian.
Don't.
Okay, I won't. But I think, even in general, I feel like you have to, like, if you want to pursue a comedian for whatever, despite Bree's excellent warning, you do have to be careful and be like, you have to like make it really clear, like, hey, like, we are also coworkers. Like you need to make sure that no matter what happens between you two, you will still see each other as equal when you're at work, which is usually a random bar in the middle of Connecticut, but like, or even at a show or something.
You just
And-
walk around your apartment, you both have notepads looking at each other.
yeah, just like,
But the funny thing about that too, though, is dating a comedian is they get the persona that you're putting off. Not dating a non-comedian, like I get on stage, I have a boyfriend, and I talk about how I'm single and like doing all this whatever and all this, and he's in the back like, no, no,
Yeah.
and like, but it's just like, so when you are with someone who is in the same kind of entertainment limelight, it does make that part a little bit easier.
yeah. And there's probably, there's artists who have dated each other, musicians. There's probably some like really cool collaboration. But I think like one thing where it comes up is like sometimes people ask someone out like right after their set and they'll just be like, hey, like no thanks. And then they'll like keep trying, and that's also kind of awkward. Like it's like, I don't know. I guess it's complicated.
If guys,
but
especially when guys are being too like forward and stuff like that, I always wonder if like being on stage just immediately gets to their head and they're like, everyone was just looking at me. Look
Yeah.
how awesome I was.
see,
I can talk to anyone.
I was ugly in high school, so I have a sense of shame, and I know that's not true. Like I know that
I
just
was
because
ugly
I'm
in high
on
school
stage.
and now.
You are beautiful, Pete.
Yeah, thank you.
Also,
Yeah.
I need pictures. I don't believe you.
No, I was kind of weird looking. I was like really, really thin and like wore teacher clothes. It was weird. Anyway, but yeah, I think part of it is like, I guess with any entertainment kind of industry where you're on stage and a lot of people are like fawning over you, and you're like, oh, like I could get all the insert genitalia here I want, and like that's not a good ego blast to have in general regarding anything.
Especially with some delusional people.
Yeah, especially with some delusional people. But But yeah, I guess.
I wish I had that confidence.
How about don't?
Yeah, don't.
Like, just don't.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with getting to know someone before you ask them out on a date?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I feel like if
Not
it were
fast enough.
Yeah, I feel like there are like maybe situations where comedian potentially dating other comedians would make sense, but it won't be like, oh, I just had this set about like my mom hating me. Let me ask her out because I really thought she was funny. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's probably more organic, like more like friendship based. So like, and also I think asking anyone out when they're at work, no matter how weird their work is always kind of weird. Like I used the Starbucks barista example.
just because we went to Starbucks.
No, well, but I mean also like I think
You talked more about Starbucks than I did.
well, it's also because I do know people who are in like kind of low-wage workers, I guess, where service work, where their job is to be nice to someone, and then if like someone asks you out when you're on your job and they're like being really creepy and like sticking around, you can't explicitly be like, no, please get out of here. Because it's your job to be nice, you know? And part of comedy, I mean, you don't always have to be nice, but it helps you if you are nice to people. And I think there might be some tension where it's like, oh, if I turn down this person's advances, if they're like kind of high up there, will I get less gigs? Like, will I get...
There is definitely that thought
And that's...
process.
So like, I've had crushes on people I've worked on. I didn't act on them, but I think also... if you are in that situation for whatever reason, I think like even having a discussion like if you reject my advances, there will be no like retaliation against you. I don't know how it would work, but making that explicit would be helpful. So that's one thing that I guess people could do. And it sounds awkward, but dating anyone is awkward. I think, yeah.
With your service thing, I work in retail, as I mentioned earlier, and let me tell you, I work in Westport, so you have these guys that are like super wealthy, can do whatever they want. I can't tell you how many times when I'm working in the men's department, standing outside the dressing room, and these personal trainer, like Fairfield, you guys come in, they'll get undressed not in the dressing room and just be like, ugh, is this too tight? Like, ugh. And I'm just like...
I actually don't care. Is that what you think? Just like, I don't care whether it's too tight or
But you're
not.
right. I have to sit there and be like, oh, maybe you should go to a size up, but I don't want you to develop an eating disorder.
You can't clap back at them because then they'll complain to your manager and be like, this small girl.
So someone did complain about me once. They were like, she gave me a really bad attitude. And I looked at my boss and I go, he was stripping in the middle of the store.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absurd. It's absurd. Yeah, man.
I'll be like, do you have a changing room under a bridge behind a cave?
Yeah.
I don't even want a chance anyone might see me.
Heck, I don't even try on the clothes. I didn't even really know it was actually part of it. I'm in, out, like 3
I buy it,
seconds.
I leave.
I know the size of my pants. I've been the same size for like 10 years.
So there was another female comedian who had a joke about this at open mic I was at. Women's clothes are just needlessly complicated.
Yeah.
And so like, I usually wear, I guess like
Pants
a
are the
size.
ones that complicate me.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, and I could see that also with like people who don't like just different body types. But I feel like with women's clothes, like a size 10 could be 50 different things. So that's why I always have to try on pants. But yeah, one big hint: it's not to change in front of people unless you know that they're fine with that.
Yeah, that's generally something you don't do. That's generally why you would build changing rooms in a department store in the first place.
Yes.
And again,
Closing
men
doors
who
and
think
locks.
that they have whatever they want can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah,
So where does it stop?
Where does it stop? That's true.
Where does it stop?
Yeah.
No, agreed completely. Let's have a look at a little talking notes here. We'll see if we can't. And if you're talking to somebody who has dealt with it, obviously we're talking about it here. We're talking about it a little in the past. If somebody were to come to you, or you were to see something, what should people do? What's the best way to handle that?
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, believe them is like the first one. Like, because usually when people come up, and say something, they don't really have any reason to lie. And I think the percentage of like false rape cases is the percentage of like false accusations regarding like sexual assault issues is like the same as false accusations for anything, which is like 2%. So either like unless you're dealing with like someone who's is a sociopath, like they're probably telling the truth. In terms of what should be done, I think with the way, like the legality of things is a big thing, because like people could potentially be sued for libel if they say like the name of their accuser. And this is something that I've spoken about in like college spaces. So, and when I was in undergrad, there were rapists, and people were like, how do we make sure that these people don't affect anyone else without, their rich Westport dad suing us. So I think like at this point, it seems like word of mouth and warning other people about that person.
No,
is
you
helpful,
can't
or-
just warn about people. You have to do something about it.
Yeah, or
Like
Yeah.
I know that there's this booker who's banned from 4 different New York comedy clubs because of an incident
Sorry,
that
yes.
happened. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just, oh, don't talk to that person, or be careful when you're with that person, blah, blah, blah. No, that person needs to be approached, needs to be said, hey, guess what? You're a pervert and you need to cut it out, or we're just not gonna book you. Like, it's just a thing. Like, you have to ostracise these people.
Yeah.
You know
I
what
think
I
that's
mean?
what she's saying is the what she means by doing that. Like,
when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, everyone knows about it and does
tiptoe
nothing.
around
But
it.
like, if I ostracize this booker, it's not going to have any effect on his life, right? Like, if just like me alone, and then other people who have been in comedy that long, like he probably doesn't even care about us. But if like other bookers start ostracizing this booker because they know, and other
you see
people
a
with
swell,
power,
yeah, Booker sees a swell of comics, like, especially young talent comics that are coming up and stuff like that. Like, oh, they're all pulling away from this area and this. That's enough to take notice of it.
Yeah.
You kind of need that groundswell. Also, if that's the case, I'm just every mic I'm like keeping that person in the corner of my eye. And
We just have to look out for each other.
pretty much. Like,
Yeah.
if someone tells me they're worried about this person, and it's funny, it's been my entire life. Parties, get together, anytime someone's like, hey, so and so is being weird, whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, I am now keeping whoever told me that
Yep.
behind me and that person in front of me at
Yeah.
all times.
I have no problem going up to someone and being like, "Hey, can you just like one of my really close friends that we all know is a comedian with us. He is my go-to buddy when I'm like, can you stand with me and like pretend that
Yeah.
like and just like watch out for me?" And he always does, like
Yeah.
never fail, And it's a buddy system. Like you
Yeah.
have to have a buddy system in some way, and we all have to just look out for each other. We're a weird dysfunctional family, guys.
Yes. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. It seems like for a lot of things, like non-legal action may be the best way, and like ostracizing. So like if it starts affecting their money, that's when people pay attention.
Like, I don't want to ruin someone's life outside of comedy, but don't
Yeah.
ruin mine because of
Yeah,
comedy.
yeah, exactly. And I think this is something that a lot of people are also trying to work out with, like figure out as well. But I have heard cases of like people being banned from comedy clubs. There was that Upright Citizens Brigade guy, I think. That
I think I know what you're talking about.
I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Something on that, although I really don't know any of the story, but yeah.
Yeah, I know that he's trying to sue them for gender discrimination because he was banned from the Upright Citizens Brigade after accusations came up, and it's weird that he's trying to construe it as like oh, they're just banning me because I'm a man, and it's like, no, there are obviously other men in this theater.
You're the one, dude.
Yeah, right.
It's just you. And so I mean, like I think there are some bold people who would try to do that, but yeah.
Whatever. A swimmer raped a girl and only got 6 months of jail time.
Exactly.
So, come
Yeah.
on.
Was
So
that
like
the
yeah.
was
Affluenza kid, or
great.
was it somebody else?
Brock
Turner.
Turner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he got let off.
I thought it was like less than that. Like
He was
Yeah.
another kind of rich kid, if I'm not mistaken.
He was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's also like why a lot of people are reluctant to go through the legal avenue, is because they know the entire process like will not necessarily turn out in their favor. Like there was
Think about all the judges and stuff in our judicial court system that have like used their position to do things like that. Think of the politicians and all that stuff.
Yeah,
And
there's
it's
so many
like-
politicians.
It's like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, come on.
Yeah. That being said, I wish I were brave enough to like if someone was trying to like mess with my friend, like I would love to have the courage to punch them in the face or be drunk enough, either one. That would be great. I've
Don't
never
do the
been.
latter because the punch misses and then you get hit and it's
Oh
worked
yeah,
out good for me.
yeah. You need to like.
You're disgusting.
You need to.
You're
Yeah.
missing a lot of punches, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I hope that kind of answered the question, or at least started some discussion, because I think I don't even know all the answers of like what exactly
It's
to
real,
do.
but it's one of the things you almost learn that you can't have all the answers. It's such
Yeah.
a crazy thing of so many different situations and
Yeah.
different, severities of them.
Just don't stop talking about it.
Yeah, don't stop talking about it. Yeah.
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 Yeah, agreed. With that in mind, is there anything else anybody wanted to discuss? Anything burning in your minds?
One thing that I feel like I've noticed and I think is interesting is some men, hashtag not all men, whatever, some guys,
You're such an Instagram
Well-
post.
hashtag cool, hashtag
What filter we
lit,
got? What filter?
hashtag
God, where's the filter?
But I've noticed, so there was one time where I was at a show and I had finished my set about being a huge lesbian. I mean, it wasn't just about that, but I made jokes regarding that. And
I just love the wording.
about being a huge lesbian. A very, very obese
She was
lesbian.
huge.
But I had done my set, and then I had went in the back and spoken to my friend, and this comedian was about to come on. And me and my friend were finishing up a conversation, so I was trying to wrap it up, and then the comedian looks towards us and he says like, "Hey, like, what are you talking about?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, it wasn't concerning you." Like, I think we were literally talking about persimmons, and in response to this, it's like a fruit. It was like such a random, it actually wasn't about him, and in response to this, he literally just like talked about for like 5 to 10 minutes about how he was gonna have sex with me, like, and it was a very uncomfortable experience. And it just made me very uncomfortable, especially with the kind of like background of like there's a lot of coercive rape regarding lesbians. Not saying that I thought he would do that, but like to even like threaten that for comedy in a large group of people, I was just like, yikes.
That's not okay.
Yeah, it wasn't okay. I agree. And so, so that's like a very extreme example. I do.
It's less extreme than you'd think, though. That kind of stuff, I feel like, is not.
Yeah.
Because guys, a lot of guys is like coming up and it's just riffing on someone because they were talking.
Yeah.
And they think it's like they think that's just not a big deal.
And I feel like with heckling, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I need to do whatever it takes to like shut them up," which is like, don't heckle. To anyone watching this, don't heckle. Comedians will get mad. But it's like you could have, that person could have like. First of all, I wasn't even heckling. I was just like having conversation about persimmons. Second, if I were heckling,
persimmons.
I guess he does.
Is that- you must
But
have
if I
taken it
were, I
personally.
feel like there's
He's more of a kumquat.
maybe. But even
Steal
if
my pet name's my boyfriend.
But even if I were heckling, I feel like there's other ways to get me to stop talking other than being like, I will literally have sex with you because I'm so upset with you talking right now. Like, I feel like that's just a
That'll
line
terrify
that
you into silence.
Yeah. So I just started I moved up and just kind of glared at him and I was like, are you really going to do this right now? And there was a whole
You should
thing.
have laughed and said, "Then I'll turn you gay."
Or like something, yeah. But then
It's great too because you were just another comic on, and they know you. Like you're talking, it happens. Like there's plenty of times where a comic comes off at a mic or show, whatever, talking to a friend. They just you're still kind of in that mode. You let it go. Maybe you say, hey, so like if it's a comic I'm friends with him, like, hey, Kendra, shut up.
yeah, and like that's all it would have taken, and I would have done it.
Exactly. I can understand like going hard at like a heckler who has been like talking to them the entire set. They can't get a word out. But yeah, that like mindset of that jump is like, oh, she's talking and horrible things and horrible like
Yeah. Like
that just comes from that person. I think that's like ingrained into some people that they feel like that's their jump go-to.
yeah, and I understand like you do need to shut down hecklers, and I think someone was also saying this in regards to like the show Louis, where there was one point where a woman like it was scripted. It was like obviously in the show where she was like, "That's not funny," and then he's like, "Oh, it looks like you're like dad has AIDS or I forgot exactly what it was. And it was like, okay, there's like shutting down heckling, but I feel like sometimes it does veer towards automatically like sexual, or like not even sexual insults, but like someone saying like, oh, I will sexually assault you, but like in kind of a funny way. And that just makes me uncomfortable. That's all I have to say. Like, you could just say you're ugly, shut up. Like, I've thought of like that's all I'm saying. You could say other things to that person to get them to shut up. Like,
I might try that.
Yeah, right.
you're ugly,
You're
shut
ugly,
up.
shut up.
I once asked some a heckler or whatever. I was like, excuse me, and they were like, what? And I was like, does this chloroform smell like a rag to you? Shut the up.
Yeah, it's I think it's also like different from like a dude to a guy, and I think it was like a lot of complex like the layers outside of the situation, where if I just described it, it may seem like one thing, but it was also at an event where there were like teen girls in the audience, and I was like, you're really doing this in front of these girls who have a 1 in 3 chance in their lives of being like sexually assaulted, and it just like gave me incredibly bad vibes. And then the host was like, hey, like this is about, this is just, it's comedy. I was like, well then you need to be better, you need to be more funny, because
That's just a bad comedian.
yeah.
That's
Sounds
always
like a bad person a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a really weird jump to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know, so many people, they use that blanket statement of it's comedy as like as a right to say anything. Like,
Yeah.
They're probably the most impotent non-sexual people that talk about it like that.
Yeah.
It's like the guy that drives the big ass truck that's all lifted and plays.
That has the fake nuts on
that
it.
has the fake nuts on it and everything. Those are
I
those
only
comedians.
have the first part of that scenario.
No,
Having a
but
truck.
Do you
I
make
know.
kumquat get down real low and scrub the hubcap sometimes?
No, I do that.
So you take care of your own truck. I understand. Yeah. Yeah. Some people are insecure and they just have to put it on me, and I'm just trying to like les it up with my friends. That has nothing to do with you. You don't need to yell about. He was like, "I'm gonna give you the mic, metaphorical mic."
It's such a
So
like
stupid.
it's so often it's like that macho thing. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
it was
watch
really-
me do this. And
Yeah.
All right, well, guys, thanks for coming out. This has been great. Thanks for being a part of the discussion.
Thank you. This was really fun.
And we'll catch everybody next time.
Deuces.